Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're looking at something incredibly common, yet fascinatingly complex: the viruses that live on and in our skin, causing a whole range of well-known conditions that many of us have probably dealt with at some point.
So here's what we've got lined up. We'll start with the absolute basics of what a virus actually is. Then, we're going to dive into some of the most common viral families that affect the skin. And finally, we'll have a look at how these conditions are actually identified and managed.
Right then, first things first, what exactly are we dealing with when we talk about a virus? Because, to understand the diseases, you've really got to understand the intruder.
In the simplest terms, think of viruses as tiny biological pirates. They're completely unable to make copies of themselves on their own. So what do? They have to hijack the machinery inside our very own cells to get the job done. And that's absolutely crucial, because it means you can't just attack the virus without potentially harming the host cell it's hiding inside.
And if you could peek inside one, you'd see just how simple yet incredibly effective a virus's structure is. At its very heart, you've got the genetic blueprint, all the instructions, and that's wrapped up in a protective protein coat. It really is the ultimate minimalist design, and it's built for one single purpose: to invade.
Now, those genetic instructions come in two main flavors: DNA or RNA. The viruses we're going to focus on today, like herpes and HPV, they're mostly DNA viruses. And believe me, this fundamental difference in their genetic code is the key to understanding how they behave inside our bodies.
Okay, let's move on to our first case study. And it's a big one, a virus family that I'm sure many of you will be familiar with: herpes simplex.
Yep, a site many of us will know all too well. This is the most common form of herpes simplex virus 1, or HSV1, that familiar and often very unwelcome cold sore. But here's the thing that makes HSV so persistent. It's a master of survival. See, once you're infected, which happens through direct contact, the virus doesn't just leave. No, it retreats into your nerve cells and sets up shop for life, establishing what we call a latent infection. That means it can just lie dormant for years before deciding to pop up again. Now, you've probably heard of HSV1 and HSV2. While they are part of the exact same viral family, they do typically prefer different neighborhoods. HSV1 is the one usually associated with cold sores around the mouth, whereas HSV2 is the primary cause of genital herpes.
Now, staying with the herpes virus family for a moment, let's talk about another member, but one with a really different story. This one virus is actually responsible for two completely distinct conditions that show up at very different stages of a person's life.
Chickenpox. I'm sure this image brings back some rather itchy memories for a few of you. This, of course, is the highly contagious rash of chickenpox, the primary infection caused by the varicella-zoster virus, which most of us get when we're kids.
The life cycle of this virus is really quite remarkable. It all starts with that widespread chickenpox rash, but then, just like its cousin herpes simplex, it doesn't disappear. It retreats into the sensory nerve cells and goes into a dormant state, sometimes for decades, only to potentially re-emerge later in life with a very painful comeback.
And that comeback is called shingles. Now, the key difference here is its distribution. Instead of a rash scattered all over the body, shingles erupts along the path of a single nerve, what's known as a dermatome. That's why you get that classic band-like rash on one side of the body, and it's also why it can be so intensely painful.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the herpes family, so now let's look at a couple of other extremely common skin intruders, warts and molluscum, which are caused by entirely different families of viruses.
So, if you look at these two side by side, you can immediately spot some key differences, can't you? Molluscum lesions on the left are often smooth and pearly, and they have that distinctive central dimple. Warts, on the other hand, well, they typically have a much rougher, almost cauliflower-like surface. This one, molluscum, is caused by a type of pox virus. It's particularly common in young children, and it's very contagious, spreading easily through direct contact in places like swimming pools or schools.
Warts, however, are caused by the human papillomavirus, or HPV, which is actually a huge family of viruses. And what's fascinating here is that the infection can be latent, which means the virus can be present in your skin without any visible wart at all. Oh, and you know those tiny black dots you sometimes see in them? Those are actually tiny clotted blood vessels.
So that's quite a rogues gallery of viruses, all causing different things.
The big question is, how do doctors figure out which is which? And what on earth can we do about them?
Well, it usually all starts with a doctor just having a good look, a clinical examination by a trained eye. But to be absolutely sure, or in some of the trickier cases, there's a whole range of lab tests that can be used, from taking a swab for a viral culture to a PCR test which can confirm exactly which virus is responsible.
And this quote here, this really gets to the heart of the matter when it comes to managing so many of these viral infections. The goal isn't eradication, because for these latent viruses, that's just not on the cards. The aim is control, shortening the outbreaks, managing the symptoms, and trying to prevent them from coming back. And of course, we can't talk about viruses without talking about our own body's defenses. Our immune system is the primary weapon we have to keep these latent viruses in check. This explains why infections, from herpes to shingles to warts, can all become much more severe or widespread in people whose immune systems are weakened for any reason.
So, to quickly wrap things up, what are the big takeaways here? Well, first, viruses are incredibly efficient parasites that rely on us to survive. Second, many of the most common ones that affect our skin are playing the long game, setting up infections that last a lifetime. And because of that, our medical relationship with them is all about long-term management, not a one-and-done cure.
And this leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We live in a world that is just teeming with viruses. They are an inescapable part of our biology. So the real question isn't how we defeat them, but how we continue to evolve this incredibly complex and ongoing relationship with them.